There is a silent enemy living inside you, not something monstrous or mythical, but something painfully human. It wakes up when you feel ignored, when someone disrespects you, when life refuses to go the way you planned. It tightens your chest, clouds your thinking, and convinces you that reacting is power. That enemy is anger. Most people believe anger makes them strong, fearless, dominant, but in reality it does the opposite. It hijacks your mind, strips you of clarity, and turns you into something predictable and easily controlled. Every harsh word you regret, every relationship you damaged, every opportunity you lost in a moment of rage was not bad luck, it was anger wearing the mask of strength. And the worst part is that you keep feeding it, justifying it, defending it, calling it natural or necessary. But what if anger is not a weapon at all? What if it is a leash, and every time you explode, someone else is holding the handle? Imagine a life where insults don't shake you, where provocation doesn't control your actions, where chaos surrounds you but your mind remains still. This is not fantasy, and it is not weakness. It is a discipline that ancient warriors understood better than modern men ever have. Long before self-help books and motivational speeches, there were fighters who faced death daily and learned that emotional control was the difference between survival and destruction. Among them was a swordsman whose name became legend, not because he was the strongest or the fastest, but because he mastered something far more dangerous, his own mind. While others burned with rage, he remained calm. While others reacted, he observed. While others lost control, he gained it. His victories were not accidents, and they were not fueled by anger. They were built on stillness. The truth is, anger feels powerful because it is loud, but real power is quiet. Real power is the ability to pause when everything inside you screams to react. It is the ability to feel anger without obeying it. Most people never learn this. They live their entire lives as emotional prisoners, pulled by invisible strings every time someone presses the right button. A single insult can ruin their day. A single setback can define their mood. A single moment of disrespect can trigger consequences that last years. But there is another way to live, one that does not require suppressing emotion or pretending to be calm. It requires understanding what anger truly is and refusing to let it rule you. The ancient warrior mindset teaches that you do not destroy anger by fighting it, but by seeing through it. When you understand that anger is a reaction, not an order, its grip begins to loosen. This is the beginning of mastery. Not mastery over others, but mastery over yourself. And that kind of mastery changes everything. It changes how you speak, how you move, how you decide, and how you stand when the world tries to push you off balance. This path is not easy, and it is not comfortable. It demands honesty, discipline, and the courage to look inward rather than blame the outside world. But those who walk it become something rare in any era, unshakable. They are not calm because nothing happens to them, they are calm because they have trained themselves to remain still no matter what happens. This is the mindset that erases anger at its root, not by denying it, but by transcending it. And once you understand this, you can never see anger the same way again. The moment a person begins to observe their anger instead of acting on it, something unsettling becomes clear. Anger is rarely about the situation itself. It is about expectation. You expect respect, you expect fairness, you expect people to behave the way you believe they should, and when reality violates those expectations, anger rushes in to defend your ego. This is why two people can face the same insult and react completely differently. One explodes, the other remains calm. The event is identical, but the attachment is not. Ancient warriors understood this long before psychology gave it names. They realized that anyone who could provoke you could control you, and a man who can be controlled is already defeated. Emotional reactions make you predictable, and predictability is weakness in any form of conflict, whether it is a fight, a conversation, or a moment of pressure. When anger takes over, your awareness narrows, your body tenses, and your thinking becomes rigid. You stop seeing options and start chasing relief through reaction. This is why anger often feels justified in the moment but leaves regret in its wake. The warrior's discipline begins with a brutal realization: the world owes you nothing. Not respect, not fairness, not understanding. The sooner this truth is accepted, the less power anger has over you. Expectation is the soil in which anger grows, and when expectation is removed, anger has nothing to feed on. This does not mean becoming passive or allowing injustice, it means acting from clarity instead of emotional compulsion. There is a profound difference between controlled action and emotional reaction. One is chosen, the other is automatic. Warriors train themselves to eliminate automatic responses because automatic responses belong to the enemy. When you react automatically, you surrender your agency. When you pause, you reclaim it. This pause, even if it lasts only a breath, creates space between stimulus and response, and in that space lives freedom. The ancient mindset teaches that anger is not an external force invading you, it is an internal habit you have practiced for years. Every time you justified it, you strengthened it. Every time you blamed someone else for how you felt, you gave it more authority. Breaking this habit requires awareness, not suppression. Suppression only hides anger, allowing it to leak out in destructive ways later. Awareness dissolves it by exposing its mechanics. When you notice how anger arises, how it tightens your body, how it pushes you toward certain words and actions, you begin to see it as a process rather than an identity. You are not angry, anger is happening within you. This subtle shift changes everything. It separates who you are from what you feel. Warriors trained this separation relentlessly because they knew that the mind must remain clear even when the body is under threat. They practiced enduring discomfort voluntarily, not to become numb, but to reduce their dependence on comfort and control. Comfort creates entitlement, and entitlement creates anger. When you believe you deserve ease, any difficulty feels like an insult. When you expect nothing, every moment becomes manageable. This is why ancient fighters slept on hard ground, walked alone, and accepted hardship without complaint. They were not punishing themselves, they were freeing themselves. By choosing discomfort, they removed the shock of discomfort imposed by others. Nothing could be taken from them because they clung to nothing. This internal freedom is the foundation of emotional control. Anger cannot dominate a mind that does not demand reality to obey it. When you stop insisting that life be different than it is, your nervous system begins to relax. You respond instead of react. You see clearly instead of blindly striking. This is the psychology behind the blade, not fury, but precision, not noise, but silence, not ego, but awareness. And once this understanding takes root, anger loses its authority, not because it is forced away, but because it is no longer believed. With this understanding, the warrior's training moved beyond ideas and into lived experience. Knowledge alone could not break the grip of anger, it had to be rewired out of the body through daily practice. The ancient masters believed that the mind reveals its true nature only under pressure, so they created conditions that exposed emotional weakness deliberately. One of the first practices was voluntary hardship. The warrior chose difficulty instead of comfort, not as punishment, but as conditioning. Cold mornings, simple food, long hours of silence, and relentless repetition stripped away dependency on ease. Each discomfort revealed how quickly irritation and anger arose when expectations were not met. Over time, the warrior began to see that much of his anger was nothing more than resistance to discomfort. When comfort was no longer expected, frustration faded. Alongside hardship came the discipline of non-reaction. Warriors were insulted, mocked, and challenged intentionally by their peers and teachers. Their task was simple but brutal: do not respond. No defending, no explaining, no retaliation. Just observe. At first, this felt humiliating. The ego screamed to be protected, to restore status, to strike back. But with repetition, something changed. The insults lost their weight. Without reaction, the provocations collapsed on themselves. The person seeking a response grew uncomfortable, exposed, powerless. The warrior learned a critical truth: reaction gives life to provocation. Silence starves it. This was not silence born of fear, but silence chosen from strength. Each moment of restraint strengthened the ability to remain centered under pressure. Another essential practice was stillness. Long periods of seated meditation forced the warrior to confront his own restless mind. Without distractions, suppressed emotions surfaced with intensity. Anger appeared not as a response to the world, but as a pattern within the mind itself. Thoughts replayed past insults, imagined future conflicts, and demanded action. The warrior was taught not to engage these thoughts, not to push them away, but to watch them arise and dissolve. This observation revealed a profound insight: anger has no permanence. When it is not fed with reaction, it burns out on its own. What once felt overwhelming became temporary, like a passing storm. Breath by breath, the nervous system learned that it did not need to escalate to survive. The body relaxed, and with relaxation came clarity. The warrior also trained his awareness of death. Each morning, he reflected on impermanence, not to invite despair, but to anchor perspective. When death is accepted as certain, trivial grievances lose their urgency. Insults shrink. Disrespect becomes insignificant. The mind stops clinging to image and status when it understands how fragile life truly is. This awareness dissolved the fear beneath anger, the fear of loss, humiliation, or erasure. Without fear, anger had nothing to protect. Slowly, through these disciplines, the warrior experienced a shift. Anger still arose, but it no longer dictated movement. It was felt, acknowledged, and released without action. The gap between impulse and response widened, allowing conscious choice. In combat training, this translated into precision and adaptability. While others rushed forward fueled by emotion, the warrior remained patient, seeing openings created by his opponent's frustration. In daily life, it manifested as calm speech, deliberate action, and an unshakable presence. This was the birth of the immovable mind. Not an absence of feeling, but mastery over it. A state where emotion informs awareness without hijacking control. Through consistent practice, anger was no longer an enemy to fight, but a signal to observe. And in that observation, its power dissolved. This transformation did not happen in a moment, but through thousands of small acts of restraint, awareness, and acceptance. Each day, the warrior practiced not being ruled by impulse, and each day, freedom grew. This is how anger is unlearned, not through suppression, but through disciplined presence. As the warrior's discipline deepened, he discovered a truth that separated surface-level control from true mastery: anger does not disappear when life becomes easier, it disappears when the mind becomes honest. Many people believe that if circumstances improve, more respect, more success, more comfort, anger will fade. The ancient path taught the opposite. External improvement only masks internal weakness. The real work begins when there is nothing left to blame. The warrior learned to watch how anger disguised itself as righteousness. It whispered that retaliation was justice, that harsh words were honesty, that dominance was strength. This illusion was dangerous because it made anger feel moral. To dismantle it, the warrior practiced radical responsibility. Nothing outside him was allowed to be the cause of his internal state. Every surge of anger was examined not as someone else's fault, but as information about his own attachments. This was uncomfortable. It required admitting insecurity, pride, fear of humiliation, and the craving for validation. But this honesty stripped anger of its camouflage. Once anger was seen as self-protection rather than truth, it lost credibility. Another layer of training focused on timing. The warrior was taught that anger always demands immediate action, because delay weakens it. Rage thrives on speed. Slowing down is its natural enemy. Before speaking, before moving, before deciding, the warrior paused deliberately. A single breath was enough to interrupt the momentum. In that pause, choice returned. Words became measured. Movements became efficient. Many conflicts dissolved before they could escalate simply because the warrior refused to move at anger's pace. This ability to slow time internally made him dangerous in combat and formidable in life. Opponents rushed, overcommit, exposed themselves. The warrior waited. Stillness became strategy. He also learned that anger feeds on identity. The more tightly a person clings to labels, strong, respected, intelligent, dominant, the more fragile they become. Any threat to that image triggers defense. The warrior trained to loosen identity. He stopped needing to appear invulnerable or superior. When image dissolved, insults had nowhere to land. Disrespect became noise, not a threat. This did not make him weak, it made him adaptable. Without ego to protect, he could adjust freely, learn openly, and act decisively. Another crucial lesson came through service. Warriors were assigned tasks beneath their status: cleaning, carrying, serving silently. This humbled the ego and exposed how quickly resentment arises when pride is challenged. Each task became a mirror. When anger surfaced, it revealed entitlement. Over time, entitlement weakened. The warrior learned that dignity does not come from status, but from conduct. This shift removed another root of anger. In moments of conflict, he no longer needed to win emotionally. He only needed to act correctly. The discipline also extended to speech. The warrior practiced speaking less, not because words were forbidden, but because unnecessary speech often masks emotional unrest. Silence forced clarity. When words were chosen carefully, they carried weight. Anger relies on excess words, excess force, excess reaction. Precision starves it. Through years of this training, anger transformed from a dominating force into a quiet signal. It indicated attachment, fear, or fatigue, but it no longer commanded action. The warrior could feel its presence without becoming it. This distinction was everything. Most people believe they are their emotions. The warrior learned that emotions pass through him, but do not define him. This realization created a profound internal stability. Praise did not inflate him. Insults did not diminish him. Loss did not shatter him. Success did not intoxicate him. He moved through experiences without clinging or resistance. This was not emotional numbness, it was emotional maturity. Anger lost its role as protector because the warrior no longer needed protection from his own mind. What remained was clarity, restraint, and quiet confidence. This is the stage where control becomes effortless. Not because anger is gone, but because it is understood. And what is understood no longer needs to dominate. With anger no longer ruling his reactions, the warrior entered a deeper and more demanding phase of discipline, mastering fear. If anger is fire, fear is shadow. It hides, distorts perception, and convinces the mind that hesitation is wisdom. The warrior learned that most people never truly confront fear, they negotiate with it. They call avoidance patience, delay strategy, and comfort balance. But beneath these polite words lives the same force that once fueled his perfectionism, the fear of being exposed as inadequate. The training demanded brutal honesty. Fear was not an enemy to destroy, but a signal to investigate. Each time hesitation appeared, the warrior asked a single question: what am I protecting? The answer was never noble. It was pride, safety, reputation, or the illusion of control. Once named, fear lost some of its power. What remains hidden grows stronger. What is seen begins to weaken. The warrior practiced deliberate exposure. Not reckless danger, but controlled discomfort. He spoke when silence felt safer. He acted before confidence arrived. He chose the harder path when the easier one promised comfort. These actions retrained his nervous system. Fear learned that it was not in charge. Over time, fear still appeared, but it no longer dictated behavior. Action came first. Courage followed. This reversed the false belief that confidence precedes action. In reality, confidence is a byproduct of survived discomfort. Another lesson was taught through fatigue. Exhaustion strips away performance. When tired, the mind can no longer maintain illusions of strength. In these moments, fear resurfaces honestly. The warrior trained while exhausted so he could observe fear without the mask of control. He learned that fear grows loud when energy is low. This insight transformed his discipline. Instead of interpreting fear as truth, he began to see it as a physiological signal. Rest, nutrition, and rhythm became tools of mental mastery, not indulgence. He stopped making life decisions while depleted. This alone prevented countless errors. The warrior also learned that fear multiplies in isolation. Left alone, the mind exaggerates risk and minimizes capability. Training alongside others revealed a powerful truth: shared struggle reduces fear. Not because danger disappears, but because perspective expands. Watching others act despite fear normalized courage. It reframed fear as common, not personal. This removed shame. And without shame, fear loses another weapon. The warrior studied history and noticed a pattern: legends were not fearless. They were decisive. Fear was present, but it did not slow commitment. Once a decision was made, hesitation vanished. This was the next discipline: commitment without constant reassessment. The warrior learned that constantly reviewing options is another form of fear. Once aligned with values, he committed fully. This produced calm. Doubt feeds on partial commitment. Full commitment starves it. The warrior's posture changed. His voice slowed. His movements became economical. These external shifts reflected internal certainty. Fear thrives in chaos and ambiguity. Structure weakens it. The warrior built simple rules: act when values are clear, rest when depleted, speak when necessary, move when uncertain. These rules removed the burden of endless decision-making. With fewer internal debates, fear had less room to operate. Another critical insight emerged: fear and imagination are inseparable. The mind projects futures to justify hesitation. Most of these futures never occur. The warrior trained his imagination deliberately. Instead of rehearsing catastrophe, he rehearsed response. He did not imagine success, he imagined adaptation. Whatever happens, I will respond. This mindset eliminated the fear of outcome. Only the next action mattered. This is where true freedom appeared. The warrior no longer needed guarantees. He trusted his ability to adjust. That trust replaced fear. Over time, fear transformed into alertness. It sharpened perception without paralyzing action. The warrior could sense danger without panicking, uncertainty without retreating. This balance created quiet dominance. Not loud confidence, but grounded presence. Others felt it instinctively. They trusted his leadership because he was not ruled by emotion. Fear had been demoted from master to messenger. It could speak, but it could not decide. This is the threshold most never cross. They spend their lives negotiating with fear, never realizing that disciplined action is the only language fear understands. The warrior crossed it by acting first, learning second, and trusting his capacity to endure. This completed another transformation. Anger no longer controlled him. Fear no longer delayed him. What remained was readiness, calm, adaptable, and unshaken. From this state, true mastery begins. With fear no longer deciding his movements, the warrior entered a quieter but far more dangerous stage of the journey: confronting emptiness. Not fear, not anger, but the absence of drive. This was the phase where many disciplined men fail, because there is no enemy to fight and no emotion to resist. Only silence. For years, the warrior's actions had been fueled by pressure, expectation, and the need to prove worth. Now that those chains were broken, a strange question appeared: why act at all? Without applause, without rivalry, without the promise of validation, motivation thinned. This was not weakness, it was withdrawal from addiction. The addiction to significance. The warrior learned that many people confuse ambition with identity. When ambition dissolves, they feel hollow, as if something essential is missing. In truth, what is missing is noise. The mind, deprived of drama, panics. It demands stimulation, conflict, comparison, urgency. The warrior was taught not to fill this emptiness immediately. To sit inside it. To let the nervous system recalibrate. Discipline without desperation feels unnatural at first. He continued training even when no emotional reward followed. No surge of pride, no rush of meaning. Just repetition. Breath. Movement. Stillness. This was the purification stage. Action without attachment. Effort without story. Slowly, something subtle emerged. A different kind of energy. Not excitement, but steadiness. Not motivation, but alignment. The warrior realized that purpose is not something you feel, it is something you enact. Feelings fluctuate. Practice remains. On days when meaning felt absent, he practiced anyway. This built a foundation independent of mood. The warrior also learned that emptiness exposes dependency. When stripped of external goals, he noticed how often he had relied on imagined futures to justify present effort. Now there was only today. Only this movement, this breath, this step. This collapsed time. Past achievements and future ambitions lost relevance. Life became immediate. This presence was uncomfortable at first because it offered no escape. But over time, it became grounding. The warrior discovered that peace is not emotional calm, it is the absence of internal resistance. He stopped demanding that training feel meaningful. He stopped asking what this effort would lead to. He simply did the work. This removed a hidden tension he had carried for years. The need for results had been exhausting him. Now, effort itself was enough. Another lesson revealed itself: emptiness is the birthplace of clarity. When noise fades, values become visible. Not imposed values, but intrinsic ones. The warrior noticed what actions he returned to naturally when no reward was attached. Movement. Learning. Service. Simplicity. These were not chosen, they emerged. He aligned his life around them. This alignment created quiet satisfaction. Not happiness, but rightness. The warrior also learned to distinguish rest from avoidance. Emptiness can tempt escape, distraction, indulgence, passivity. True rest restores presence. Escape dulls it. He refined his rhythm: deep work, deliberate rest, silence. This rhythm protected him from burnout and stagnation. He no longer chased intensity. He cultivated consistency. Consistency became his new measure of strength. Not how hard he could push, but how reliably he could return. This reliability built self-trust. And self-trust replaced motivation. He no longer needed to convince himself to act. Action was his default. The warrior noticed another shift: his relationship with time changed. Urgency dissolved. He no longer rushed to become something. He was already engaged in becoming through practice. This patience made him formidable. While others burned hot and faded, he advanced steadily. Emptiness had stripped away false urgency and revealed endurance. The warrior learned that the strongest identity is not built on intensity, but on repeatability. What you can do calmly, daily, without resistance, defines who you are. This phase completed a critical transformation. Fear no longer stopped him. Anger no longer drove him. Emptiness no longer discouraged him. He could act without emotion, without reward, without narrative. From this place, action became clean. And clean action compounds. The warrior was no longer chasing meaning. Meaning followed him quietly, emerging from the integrity of his daily practice. This is where most never arrive, because they mistake emptiness for failure. The warrior recognized it as freedom. And with that recognition, he became unshakable. Once the warrior learned to move through emptiness without fear, another challenge emerged, more subtle and more dangerous than anger or ambition: influence. People began to notice the calm. They felt it before they understood it. In conversations, others spoke more and revealed more. In conflict, tension dissolved simply because the warrior did not mirror it. This quiet presence attracted attention, respect, and sometimes dependence. And here lay a new test. Power does not always announce itself as force, sometimes it arrives as trust. The warrior understood that being unshakable made him a reference point for others. When chaos entered a room, eyes drifted toward him. When decisions felt heavy, people waited for his response. This could easily feed a new ego, more refined but just as dangerous as the old one. The desire to be seen as wise. The temptation to control outcomes, for their own good. The warrior was warned that calm can become manipulation if not governed by restraint. True mastery requires humility stronger than ego. He practiced listening without correcting. Offering presence without direction unless asked. He learned that not every situation required his intervention. Silence, when chosen consciously, is an ethical act. The warrior reflected on how many leaders confuse control with responsibility. They believe they must act to justify their role. But unnecessary action disturbs natural order. He chose instead to become a stabilizing force, not a steering one. This required deep trust in others' capacity to learn through consequence. Watching someone struggle when you could intervene is difficult. But rescuing too quickly weakens both parties. The warrior also faced projection. Some admired him excessively, attributing strength they themselves possessed but had not yet recognized. Others resented him, sensing their own instability reflected back by his stillness. Praise and hostility are two sides of the same illusion, both attempt to define you. The warrior practiced meeting both with neutrality. He neither absorbed praise nor defended against criticism. He treated them as weather. Passing conditions, not instructions. This neutrality protected his inner balance. Another realization surfaced: calm does not mean disengagement. It means precision. When the warrior did act, his actions were deliberate, minimal, and effective. He no longer wasted energy on symbolic gestures. Every movement had purpose. This efficiency confused others accustomed to dramatic effort. But results spoke quietly. Over time, the warrior refined his speech. Fewer words. Clearer intent. He understood that excessive explanation is often insecurity in disguise. He spoke only what was necessary, and this made his words carry weight. Silence became his ally. In silence, others revealed themselves. Patterns became visible. He could sense tension before it erupted, dishonesty before it hardened, fear before it masked itself as aggression. This awareness did not come from vigilance but from openness. His nervous system was no longer occupied by self-defense. It was free to perceive. The warrior also learned boundaries. Compassion without boundaries leads to depletion. He did not confuse kindness with availability. He chose when to engage and when to withdraw. This selectivity preserved his energy and clarity. He realized that being unprovocable does not mean being endlessly accessible. Strength includes refusal. Calmly saying no is a form of self-respect. As his influence stabilized, the warrior returned repeatedly to a core discipline: anonymity. He practiced being effective without being visible. Helping without being credited. Leaving situations better than he found them without leaving a trace. This protected him from identity inflation. The warrior remembered that the goal was not to be admired, but to be aligned. Admiration fades. Alignment compounds. In this phase, he understood that mastery is not proven by dominance, but by stewardship. Of energy. Of attention. Of choice. He had moved beyond reacting to the world. Now he was responsible for how his presence shaped it. And that responsibility demanded even greater stillness. As the warrior's influence stabilized, life presented its most deceptive test: success without struggle. The battles that once sharpened him no longer appeared with the same intensity. Problems resolved more easily. Conflict softened around him. This created a dangerous illusion that growth had ended. Comfort, when earned, can quietly erode discipline. The warrior noticed subtle shifts: training sessions shortened, reflection became optional, silence was replaced by mild distraction. Nothing dramatic, nothing obviously wrong. Just small compromises. This is how mastery decays. Not through collapse, but through comfort. The warrior confronted a truth few accept: discipline is most necessary when life feels smooth. He reinstated non-negotiables. Fixed times for training. Daily stillness. Regular solitude. These were no longer tools for survival but acts of respect for the path itself. He learned that systems protect you when willpower fades. So he built systems that did not rely on mood or circumstance. Another realization emerged: peace does not remove responsibility, it clarifies it. With inner conflict resolved, external responsibility becomes more visible. The warrior became aware of how his choices affected others, even indirectly. Words carried weight. Absence carried meaning. He could no longer act carelessly and blame emotion. Everything was intentional now. This level of clarity was sobering. There was no one left to fight, no excuse left to hide behind. Only choice. He learned that freedom is not light, it is heavy. When nothing compels you, you are accountable for everything you do. The warrior accepted this weight without resentment. He simplified his life further. Fewer commitments. Deeper ones. He chose depth over breadth. Mastery does not expand endlessly, it condenses. The warrior also faced boredom. Not the restless boredom of craving stimulation, but the flatness that comes from predictability. Routine, once stabilizing, can become dull. The mind seeks novelty. The warrior resisted artificial excitement. Instead, he learned to deepen attention. He discovered that boredom is often shallow perception. When attention sharpens, even repetition reveals nuance. Each movement, each breath, each interaction contained infinite variation. This returned vitality to his practice. He also re-examined ambition. Not to reignite it, but to refine it. Ambition driven by ego had been burned away. What remained was contribution. How could his steadiness serve beyond himself? Not through preaching or display, but through example. He understood that embodiment teaches more than instruction. People observe how you move through difficulty, not what you say about it. The warrior became careful with what he modeled. Integrity became non-negotiable. Small dishonor now felt intolerable. He corrected himself quickly, not with shame, but with precision. Another lesson surfaced: stillness must be renewed. It is not a permanent state achieved once. It is a practice maintained. The warrior noticed that stress, fatigue, or complacency could still disturb him if unchecked. This humility kept him training. He never claimed to be finished. He claimed to be practicing. This protected him from stagnation. He also cultivated gratitude, not as an emotion, but as orientation. Noticing what is sufficient reduces the urge for excess. The warrior did not seek more. He sought alignment. This alignment produced quiet confidence. Not certainty about outcomes, but trust in process. He knew that whatever arose, he could meet it without collapsing. This was the real achievement. Not invulnerability, but resilience without drama. In this phase, the warrior stopped asking who he was becoming. He focused on how he was showing up. Identity dissolved into behavior. And behavior, refined daily, became destiny. With identity now expressed through action rather than self-image, the warrior entered a phase few recognize as training at all: ordinariness. There were no visible milestones left, no dramatic breakthroughs, no stories worth telling. Life became simple. Wake, practice, work, rest. This simplicity was not emptiness but refinement. The warrior understood that what most people seek in transformation is not truth, but stimulation. They want to feel different, special, awakened. The warrior wanted to be reliable. He wanted his inner state to be so stable that circumstances barely registered. In this stage, he noticed how deeply society is addicted to reaction. News, conflict, outrage, comparison. All designed to hijack attention and provoke emotion. Because the warrior no longer fed these mechanisms, he felt increasingly separate, not superior, but insulated. He chose carefully what entered his mind. Attention became sacred. He realized that what you repeatedly consume, you become. So he consumed less. Fewer opinions. Fewer narratives. More direct experience. This sharpened perception further. The warrior also faced loneliness. Not social isolation, but philosophical distance. When you no longer bond through complaint, anger, or shared enemies, many connections fall away. He accepted this without bitterness. Connection built on reactivity is fragile. He cultivated fewer relationships, grounded in presence rather than stimulation. These relationships were quieter, slower, and more resilient. The warrior also learned to integrate stillness with participation. Withdrawal is easier than engagement. True mastery is remaining centered while fully involved in the world. He did not become detached or cold. He laughed, worked, supported, and failed like anyone else. The difference was internal posture. He did not cling to outcomes. He did not dramatize setbacks. When mistakes occurred, he corrected them cleanly and moved on. This made him dependable. People trusted him not because he was perfect, but because he was stable. Another insight surfaced: suffering does not end, resistance does. Pain still visited, loss, disappointment, fatigue. But suffering, the mental struggle against reality, had weakened. The warrior allowed experiences to pass through without turning them into identity. He grieved without becoming grief. He felt frustration without becoming angry. Emotions were weather, not residents. This flexibility preserved energy. The warrior also recognized a final trap: spiritual pride. The belief that one has transcended what others struggle with. This illusion separates and hardens. He countered it with empathy. He remembered his own past volatility. He treated others' emotional reactions not as flaws, but as stages. He did not rush them. He did not judge. This compassion kept him human. As years passed, the warrior's presence became almost invisible. He was not the loudest, the fastest, or the most impressive. But when pressure mounted, he remained. When others scattered, he stayed. When decisions had to be made without certainty, he acted calmly. This made him invaluable. He understood now that the highest form of strength is continuity. Being there, again and again, without erosion. He no longer measured life by intensity or achievement. He measured it by coherence. Were his values, actions, and inner state aligned? Most days, yes. And when they were not, he adjusted. Quietly. Without drama. This ordinariness was not resignation, it was mastery matured. The warrior had become someone who could be trusted with silence, responsibility, and time. And that, he realized, was rarer than any dramatic form of power. In the final stage of the warrior's path, nothing outwardly changed, yet everything was complete. There was no ceremony, no declaration of mastery, no moment where the world acknowledged what had been forged within him. Completion did not announce itself, it settled. The warrior understood now that the path was never about eliminating anger, fear, or desire, but about ending their authority. They still arose at times, quietly, briefly, like echoes of an old language. But they no longer dictated behavior. Choice did. This was the true victory. He no longer reacted to life as something happening to him. Life moved through him, and he responded with clarity. In moments of pressure, his breath slowed instead of quickening. In moments of insult, his attention turned inward instead of outward. In moments of uncertainty, he paused instead of panicking. These pauses were his power. Most people rush because they are afraid of silence. The warrior trusted it. He had learned that silence is not absence, but information. It reveals what urgency tries to hide. Over time, others described him as calm, grounded, difficult to provoke. He accepted these descriptions without attachment. Labels were unnecessary. What mattered was function. Could he act well under stress? Yes. Could he remain kind without becoming weak? Yes. Could he stand firm without becoming rigid? Yes. The warrior also released the need to teach overtly. He understood that transformation spreads through proximity, not persuasion. People changed around him not because he told them to, but because his behavior offered a different reference point. In conflict, his restraint slowed escalation. In uncertainty, his steadiness created space for better decisions. This was leadership without force. He also accepted impermanence fully. Bodies age. Skills fade. Roles shift. Nothing is held forever. Because he did not cling, these changes did not frighten him. He adapted without identity collapse. He was not his strength, his calm, or his discipline. He was the one practicing them. This distinction preserved freedom. When loss came, he met it cleanly. When success came, he received it lightly. He did not build a self around either. The warrior's final understanding was simple but uncompromising: mastery is maintenance. There is no final state you arrive at and keep. There is only daily alignment. Each day you either reinforce clarity or allow drift. Knowing this, he never stopped practicing. Not out of fear of regression, but out of respect for reality. Life is dynamic. So must be discipline. In his presence, there was no tension, no need to perform, no demand to be anything other than honest. This made others feel safe. Safety is rare. And powerful. The warrior did not seek legacy. He did not aim to be remembered. He focused on being accurate in the moment. Accuracy of response. Accuracy of intention. Accuracy of restraint. If something needed to be said, he said it. If silence served better, he stayed silent. This flexibility was the mark of completion. Not rigidity, not detachment, but responsiveness without reactivity. In the end, the warrior realized that what he had been cultivating all along was not control, but trust. Trust in his ability to meet whatever arose without betraying himself. And with that trust established, there was nothing left to prove, nothing left to conquer. The demon had not been destroyed. It had been outgrown. And in that quiet outgrowing, the warrior became truly immovable.